Ron Skinner is a veterinarian out of Hall, and I've talked to Ron. He's a rancher too, and he averaged 47 pounds lighter in his feeder calves 2 years ago, and you know, each one of them. And just for him, what he took to market was about a $16,000 loss, you know, just for him. So now we have factors like that that we know add to the cost of having wolves. And Joe just recently here, this, you know, there was like 3 or 4 wolf bills, you know, in the Senate and all that, which Schweitzer pretty much shot down most of them. But anyway, he came up, a new study where he put together everything, included even like, you know, the cost of replacing fencing that cattle had, you know, were run through by wolves, and the vet bills, and the lost, you know, the lost in weight of cattle. And his new number right now is that wolves are costing the state of Montana $120 million plus a year. And that's including the loss of hunting opportunities and the you know, the value of the elk and the deer and stuff that the wolves have killed. But that's a lot of money. And you know, I grew up in Illinois. Anybody ever remember old Everett Dirksen? He was one of our state senators.
Billionaire.
Yeah, oh yeah, he was quite a character. But one of his statements that's my favorite was, he got up in front of somebody one time in a budget meeting. He said, you know, talk about $1 million here, and $1 million there, and $1 million here, and $1 million there. He said, before you know it, you're talking real money.
He said billion.
No, he said billion $1 million when he first said it.
Yeah, when he first said it was $1 million.
It was $1 million when he first said that, because that was back in the early '60s. But it was funny. I mean, everybody it's probably the quote, his most famous quote. You're talking real money. Well, things aren't getting any better right now. I mean, you know, we've got to get a handle on this wolf problem. You know, we're losing way too much. I mean, it's not just you know, the hunting, not just the game. I mean, our cattle industry in this state is in jeopardy right now. You know, we have, you know, wolves cause a lot more damage than just killing something as well. You know, we were talking about the stress a while ago that it put on cattle and the loss of weight. Well, they're realizing now that you have pregnant cow elk, pregnant moose, and pregnant does. When they go into winter, the harshest time of the year, you know, that's, you know, you get down to where we have the weather like last January when it was 40-something below zero outside. You know, they have to keep a certain caloric intake. Well, that's kind of hard to do when there's a wolf on your ass all the time. And that's what happened. These wolves are continually pushing these animals. They go into the harshest weather of the year a little bit malnourished, and so I mean they're not really ready to go into that kind of weather on top of the continued pressure. And there's a point where the wolves are putting so much pressure on our game, on the female that there's a high rate of fetus abortion with our cow elk and cow moose and does.
Also, along with that, that's also the third trimester period for any pregnant elk. So they actually need, any ungulate's going to need like 2.5% protein per day along with the calories. So in a sense, they can eat as much as they want, but when they're running all day, they burn those calories and they physically starve themselves.
It's what's happening to them. And
I live out at Proctor, and I've lived out there for about 20 years, and every spring I'd see the herd, and that'd about the only time you saw it. This spring, I took a picture. There were 14 cows, and there wasn't a calf in the bunch.
Yeah.
And I gave that picture to Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. I said, here's what you guys are doing.
Last
calf in the whole bunch.
2 years ago, I was coming out of Montour Creek area, just north of Ovando, and I'd been up there hunting for a few days. And just before I got back to the highway, I saw this bunch of 19 elk running back and forth on a little ridge, maybe about 400 yards off. So I stopped and got my binoculars out, and it was one spike and 18 cows. and there was one calf in that bunch. And then I realized what was going on. I looked down the ridge a little further, and here's a pretty good sized wolf, and he was trying to cut that calf out. And I mean, he was, because the cows actually ran at him several, I mean, just charged him a couple of times, because he got close enough, and they, 3 or 4 of those older, bigger cows, they just actually went after him. And he'd run. And then he'd come back around and try to get to that calf, and finally several of the cows, you know, just bulldogged him a little bit off to the side, and then they couldn't get across the fence. That was the problem. It was a little higher than normal fence. And they went down far enough where they found a top strand that was busted, and they all got across. And when the wolf saw my truck sitting there, he just sat down. And then the elk went right by my truck, you know, maybe 25 yards from me. But you know, they do target the young of the year, and a lot of the areas, like, you know, we can go down to the West Fork of the Bitterroot right now, and I guarantee you, they're claiming the elk counts up right now. The calf survival. I don't believe it. I don't believe it at all, because the last 2 years it's only been what, 7 to 9 per 100 cows. It takes at least a 20% survival rate, 20 calves per 100 cows, just for an elk herd to continue. I mean, not hunted, just so it can sustain itself. A hunted herd has to have at least 30 to 40 survival rate, and we don't have that anymore. Not anywhere, I don't think anywhere in western Montana. Is there as much, anybody in this room, is there as much game where you hunt at as there was 10 years ago?
Anytime you get on a track with an elk or deer track, you're going to end up on a wolf track.
Exactly. And it's just not there. I mean, this place I hunted up north of Ovando, 4 years ago, it was nothing. I'm right with you. 4 years ago, it was nothing, you know, on a good average day to see 30, 40 deer while I was in there. And then, you know, every few days you'd run in some elk. And last year I went over, we had a good snow, about a 5-inch track, just a good track of snow. Nothing, you know, you could walk in it easy, but it was deep enough that everything was going to leave a track. And I got up early one morning, and the rut was in. I thought, if I was ever going to see a buck over there, that's the time to go do it. So I drove over there in the dark. It was snowing. When I pulled in, I guarantee it's like I reached out and turned the light switch off, and the snow stopped. And I got out, and I spent that day, I put about 6 miles on foot, up and down Forest Service roads and back down, you know, just different cuts and everything. And in that much walking, plus I came back to the truck, then I eased up several roads that nobody had driven on. And I probably put another 10 or 12 miles just creeping along. My head stuck out the window. And in all of that, covering probably over 20 miles, I saw 7 deer tracks. And each one of them was a single, except for there were a doe and a fawn together. And just like I said, every one of them had a wolf track, or 2 or 3. And the only one that, I take it back, only one of them didn't have a wolf track. It had a lion track on it. So at least if that one got killed, it wasn't killed by wolves.
Question, since they brought these wolves down from another area, they're bigger in size, what were their predators up there? And the main problem down here is they're even attacking grizzly bears, aren't they?
They have, and I think, you know, younger grizzly bears are going to become more and more of a target because they can't find elk. They're
only predator up where they come from is what? Polar bear?
Well, if you go far enough north, you get into, you know, where the polar bear is. And,
I mean, they're so big.
and you get into northern, like you get into Northwest Territories, and you get into the Yukon, and you do have, you know, grizzlies there. And but actually up there, their predator has always been pretty much man. And you know, and they have had to kill a lot of wolves up there to keep from having, you know, their game herds decimated. Have any of you in this?
What I was getting at is that they were brought down here, and they're bigger, and they require more energy, so they kill more animals, and there's no nothing to combat against them.
And that's exactly our
So they
problem.
become the top predator then, and that's why they're desperate.
You know, the size of the animal, they're more aggressive. You combine that with the fact that we have way too many of them. And that's why our game numbers are just, they're not going down slow anymore. They kind of went slow for a while, and then now they're going like that right now. I mean, I went up and spent, in that same area where I was talking about, where I only saw the 7 tracks, I went up after season, before the snows got too deep, and I went up there and spent 2 days and didn't see a single track. I mean, the snows weren't bad. I mean, they weren't pushed down on all, down to the private land yet. They're just, even on the private land, you didn't see the deer or the elk. And they weren't there. They're not there anymore. I used to go up to a place called Twin Lakes, down between Darby and Hamilton. It's up in the Bitterroots, and the back of the end of the upper lake is less than a mile from the Idaho border. And we used to sit up there and camp every evening and see 3 to 5 moose come down into the lake there. I mean, well, sometimes they weren't in the lake. Sometimes they got into our right in camp, which was a little unnerving. That's why I take a dog that likes to run things off with me all the time. But anyway, the last time I was up there, we were there for 5 days and never saw a single moose. Never saw a track. They're not there anymore. 2 years ago, we were up there over Labor Day weekend, and middle of the night, I woke up and I heard cow elk calling. And then it dawned on me they were in the lake. And I listened to them for over an hour. Those elk were out in that water in that lake. They were swimming. And so finally they came across on our side of the lake and went right up by our camp and were gone. And so the next morning I got up and I walked around, and I saw the reason. There was wolf tracks everywhere. There's wolves that pushed them into the lake, and we have never seen another elk up there since then.
Toby Bridges, what is the end game? You've got an audience here. We all have our suspicions. We've all heard enough. We've all read enough. What is the end game? What is the environmentalist, governor? What is it? What is the end game?
Well, the thing is, we have actually made more inroads than most people realize. 3-4 years ago, it was kind of like whatever they wanted, whatever they said, that's what happened, that's what way it would go. They didn't have any opposition. Nobody was opposing them. Nobody was standing up saying, no, I'm not going to let you do that. And we have done that. We have turned that part around. And you can tell that in the new maneuvering of these groups now. Like how they kind of broke up their coalition back, not too long ago. And also, the fact is that, but we've seen a split in that coalition that kept taking us to court. And they're still going to take us to court.
Okay, but why do you feel they want to do this? What is
their motive?
What is their real motive? Is it to save the wolf?
Oh no, the wolf is just a pawn. I promise. They've got several reasons. First of all, they're getting filthy rich off of this. That's the best way. That's probably money's greed. Bob Fanning, who started Friends of the Northern Yellowstone Elk Herd, his comment was just follow the money, and you'll see exactly why they do it. These groups have milked our justice system out of so much money that it's almost hard for even someone who studies it as much as I have to fathom it. Between 2003 and about into 2007, they filed over 1,500 frivolous lawsuits against, most of them against the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Department of the Interior. And for those 1,500 lawsuits, they received $4.7 billion, not million, $billion in restitution and reimbursement for their padded legal expenses.
In addition to that, do you have any idea on what the privately funded trusts and other corporate organizations